My name is Niamh. I'm women's health physio, and I'm based in London. So I work in Crouch End, and I also work in a clinic called Fix in Hackney, and in East Village over in East London. And I've been a physio for a long time. And then I have three boys. I've got three kids, and then the eldest, he's nearly 12. So that's when I really developed an interest in women's health and pre and postnatal physio, because I just felt like, well, mainly I was going through a lot of the things myself that we'll be talking about today, but also it just ignited my interest, and I felt like women need this kind of specialist service for when things do pop up and they need some help with the rehabilitation. So yeah, so that's me, and today we're going to be talking about pelvic health, and more importantly pelvic floor health, and it's relevant for pregnancy and postnatal. So I'll just show you a few slides, nothing too heavy, just a few diagrams and things, and then if you've got any questions, maybe pop them in the chat box, or and we'll get to them at the end, and we'll see if you've got any other questions. Really, nothing, don't be embarrassed to ask anything that you might be wondering about, because we're all in the same boat. Shut my window there, it's a bit noisy outside. Yeah, so I'll see, Nissa, if I can share these things now. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, where's the bits I want to share now? This one. Okay. Alrighty. So let's start with the top of our core system, which is the diaphragm. So I love the diaphragm. I think it's a bit of an underrated, I want to present, don't I? It's a bit of an underrated piece of muscle. So it sits in the base of our rib cage, and it's obviously very important for breathing, but it also, you might not know, has some connections to the pelvic floor. So the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are best buddies. They work together every single time we breathe, which is amazing. So actually, breathing is a real key to the pelvic floor in pregnancy and afterwards as well for recovery. And as we know, for those of you who are pregnant in the last trimester, and you might be getting a few kicks under your ribs, the pregnancy is right up under our diaphragm. Yeah, so everything is squished and pushed up under our diaphragm. So it is a little bit restricted during pregnancy. So that's why it's really nice to practice diaphragmatic breathing. So in other words, that's just breathing into your belly and feeling your ribs move, which is a really nice way of connecting the diaphragm to the pelvic floor, which I'll get to in a bit more in a sec. So there it is, all squished up with the pregnancy, and the baby is stretching our abdominals and pushing down on our pelvic floor. So it does get a little bit out of sync when it comes to pregnancy. So that's why it's nice to practice diaphragmatic breathing during pregnancy and after pregnancy, to get the whole system in sync again. So the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, get them working like a good system, and that will promote good pelvic floor health and help minimize conditions like diastasis and pelvic organ prolapse, or POP for short. So try to practice diaphragmatic breathing and avoid gripping your abdominals. Let your bellies be relaxed so that your diaphragm and your pelvic floor can work efficiently. I love this diagram because it just shows you, how connected they are. So as you breathe in, you can see your diaphragm moves down, and so does the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, the diaphragm lifts, and so does the pelvic floor. And you can just see that the abdominals are just relaxed. They need to just go with the flow. So if you just lie or sit on a big ball and rest your hands on your tummies, And if you breathe into your tummy, then you just know that your pelvic floor and your diaphragm are moving as well, because they're all part of the same system. So I love that diagram from the Borough Education site. So let's talk about the pelvic floor muscles. So as you can kind of see from this diagram, they're like a bowl that sit in the base of our pelvis. So they're bowl shaped, and not just this kind of flat muscle that just sits there. And they're bowl shaped because their main job is to support these guys. These are our pelvic organs. So they support our bladder here at the front. This is the uterus in the middle, and then this is the rectum at the back. In real life, they're a little bit more squashed up than that, than this diagram. So that's their main job, is to support our organs and support the pregnancy. And they also help to keep us continent. So the pelvic floor muscles help to stop leakages from the bladder and from the rectum at the back. So super important jobs, I think. Keeps us continent, supports our pelvic organs, and they also have a sexual function, which is nice. So they get that, they contract during orgasm. So they're three nice jobs that our pelvic floor does for us. So that's why I'm so obsessed with that particular muscle. So signs to look out for that maybe your pelvic floor isn't working as efficiently as usual. So if you're having leaking persistently, I mean, it's normal to have some leaking, especially towards the end of the pregnancy, because the progesterone is making things soft and there's a lot more work, a lot more strain on our pelvic floor than usual during pregnancy. So it is quite normal to have the odd leak on coughing and sneezing in pregnancy. But afterwards, so when the baby is born, after about 6 weeks, that should really have stopped and not be a persistent issue for you. And if it is persistent after 6 weeks, then that's a good time to go and see Women's Health Physio. Another sign that the pelvic floor might not be as happy is bladder or bowel issues. So maybe difficulty emptying your bladder, difficulty emptying your bowels. That can be a sign, that can be a pelvic floor issue. Painful sex, so maybe afterwards, after the baby's arrived, down the line, when you do try sexual intercourse again and it's painful and that persists, then that can be a sign that the pelvic floor isn't happy as well. Or a heavy bulge feeling in the vagina. So yes, it's normal to feel a bit of heaviness in your vagina in the end of the pregnancy and in the early days, because there'll be some swelling, and that's perfectly normal. But after 6 to 12 weeks, that should have settled down. And if you're still feeling some heaviness in the vagina by then again, that's a good time to pop to the GP or Women's Health Physio and have a check. Okay. So that whole thing about how do I know if I'm doing a pelvic floor contraction correctly? I think it's important to relax your pelvic floor as well as engage it and strengthen it. I think pelvic floor relaxation, we forget about a little bit sometimes because we're all thinking that we need to be gripping and squeezing and holding onto our pelvic floor for dear life. But actually, like any muscle, it needs to be relaxed as well to work efficiently. So I always start women with pelvic floor relaxation before they get into pelvic floor strengthening. And I think it's really nice in pregnancy, especially in the last few weeks, to work a bit more on pelvic floor relaxation, because if you are having a vaginal delivery, then that just kind of makes sense. So how do I relax my pelvic floor? Because sometimes you're kind of holding onto it subconsciously, like you might be holding tension in it, a bit like you would in your neck and shoulders and not realize. So I think having a body scan, just having a moment to go through your body and think, where am I holding onto tension right now? And just tune into that and just see if you can let it go. So belly breathing is a lovely way to relax your pelvic floor. So again, like we were saying earlier, resting your hand on your belly, doing some nice deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel like your belly is moving. Because if you saw from that diagram, if the belly's moving, the pelvic floor is going to be moving and relaxing. There's some really nice pregnancy yoga type stretches that you can do postnatally as well, because it's really nice for back pain. It's really nice for relaxing your pelvic floor after having a baby. So you can do these two prenatally or postnatally, like child pose stretch, or cat cow, or happy baby, or sitting on a small Pilates ball, or sitting on your big ball, and just imagine your pelvic floor relaxing around the ball. Perineal massage is another way of relaxing your pelvic floor. So people will often do this from week 37 when they're full term, and then postnatally, if they're having painful sex and the pelvic floor is a bit tight, they can also practice perineal massage. I'm not going to go into that too much because I think Nissa has done a talk, or is doing a talk on perineal massage. But again, you can ask me any questions at the end as well if you're wondering about anything. How to engage the pelvic floor. So when you're happy it's relaxed, you can think about adding in some lifts then. So make sure you inhale to relax, to get that pelvic floor to let go. And then on the exhale, you're thinking about gathering around your back passage, vagina, and your urethra, as if you're closing those holes and drawing them upwards and inwards. Hold that for the exhale, and then let them drop and go on the inhale. So that's what you want to do. And you want to maybe just start by doing just 10 reps. Then if you still got some energy in the tank, try another 10 reps and build it up slowly from there. You've probably come across the Squeezy app. That's another way of just reminding you to do your pelvic floor, and it does show you when to relax and when to engage. It has this little dial that you can set. So measure the length of your inhale, how many seconds that is. Measure the length of your exhale, how many seconds that is, and try and put that into the settings so it's in sync with your breath. What else is there? The Elevie is a biofeedback tool that you can link up to your phone. It's pretty pricey. And it just gives you some feedback again if you're engaging properly or relaxing properly. But there's lots of things out there that you can use if you want. This thing here, the Educator, this is a basic biofeedback tool. So we pop this in the vagina, and then the stick stays out. You can buy these on Amazon for about a tenner. So the stick tells you when you are engaging your pelvic floor because it goes down, and then as you relax, the stick pops back up. So it kind of is a good way if you're not one of those people who are not sure if you're doing it right. You can do a few sessions with this just to see indeed if you are getting it to lift and if you are getting it to relax. So that's called if you put into Amazon, the Neen, N-E-E-N Educator, that will pop up. And you can also use it, you can count how many stick dips you can do. So you can kind of use it as see if you're making progress. Some other things that women can use are these vaginal weights. So there are an applicator that you pop in the vagina, and they come with little weights that you pop inside, and they help to build your pelvic floor strength over time. And then this little machine, this gizmo over here, is called a stim machine. So if I find that someone's pelvic floor is a little bit weaker than usual, needs a bit of a boost, then I'll recommend they get one of these on Amazon. So I just kind of wanted to introduce you to there's so many things out there for pelvic floor health that you can use, but at the same time, normal pelvic floor exercises and pelvic floor relaxation is fine too. I wanted to touch on prolapse a little bit for you as well. So prolapse is, let me come off screen share, and I want to show you my organs, not my organs, but my rubber organs. So pelvic organ prolapse, so these are your pelvic organs. You've got your bladder here, and that sits in front of the vagina. You've got your rectum here at the back of the vagina, and this thing on top that looks a bit like a manta ray is your uterus with the ovaries at the end. So they sit around the vagina, which is that tube in the middle. So pelvic organ prolapse is when these pelvic organs will sit a little bit lower in the vagina. So you'll feel inside the vagina, the bladder might be sitting a little bit lower in there, or the rectum might be pressing a little bit lower as well, or the cervix. So pelvic organ prolapse, that's what it is. It's when the organs are sitting a little bit lower inside our pelvis. So this is your pelvis. This is the pelvic floor. That's what you see from the outside. So they sit in there nice and snug on top of the pelvic floor. So that's essentially what it is. And it's quite normal after pregnancy and having a baby for them to be sitting a little bit lower for a while. That's quite normal and part of pregnancy. So let me come back to the share here so I can talk to you a little bit more about it. Yeah, okay. So what does it feel like? As I mentioned to you earlier, is that kind of after quite a few weeks down the line, you're still feeling a bit of a heaviness or a drag or a bulge in the vagina, or maybe you're not quite able to empty your bladder and you have to keep going back to the loo all the time, or some people describe it as a bit of a tampon feeling inside. It's common because the pelvic organs are suspended by connective tissue. So like puppet strings that help to hold them up. And that can get a little bit stretched out in pregnancy. And then the pelvic floor muscles get a little bit weaker. So they've got a little bit less support from below. So the good news is there's lots of things you can do to help prevent it and manage it, and it gets better. So things like good alignment and breathing. So as I mentioned to you earlier, practicing that belly breathing, doing your pelvic floor lifts, doing your pelvic floor relaxation, thinking about the way you lift. So if you're lifting the baby, I always ask women to blow as they go. So as you go to lift the baby, try to exhale during that lift, because that helps to reduce pressure on our pelvic organs. Avoiding constipation is a big one. Now, constipation is so common in pregnancy and postnatal, so it can be tricky to manage, but think about keeping up your water intake. Chewing your food well helps to lubricate the food, prevents constipation the other end. Having some magnesium in your diet, some fruits and veggies, the usual kind of things, all really help to manage constipation. And then if you are constipated and you do need to strain a little bit, I always ask women to support their pelvis. So try to kind of pop your hand over your vagina, your perineum, and give it a gentle lift so that it's being protected if you do need to strain. Hormonal creams, so sometimes, well, all the time we're low in estrogen after having a baby when we're breastfeeding, so sometimes some estrogen cream, vaginal cream from the GP can really help. Strengthening and not doing too much too soon. So in terms of impact exercise, which I'm going to talk to you a bit in a bit, try to start with the more gentler forms of exercise like walking and yoga and some Pilates, and then adding in the impact later on. So you're not adding too much strain on a weakened system. A temporary pessary is something that if we see you in clinic and we feel this some mild prolapse, sometimes we can use a temporary pessary, which is something that you pop into the vagina to help support the walls, and it's usually just for a couple of weeks or months, or maybe if you want to go back to exercise. So when we're talking about getting back to exercise after having a baby, it's recommended that you stick to low impact for the first 3 months of the postnatal period, and then adding in things like running later on. So up to about 6 months postnatally, 3 to 6 months at the earliest. Ideally, in an ideal world, every postnatal mum, regardless of if they had a C-section or vaginal delivery, should have the opportunity to have a pelvic health assessment with a physio. So a women's health physio to check your abdominal wall and pelvic floor via a vaginal examination before getting back to exercise. So this is a really nice infographic, and I'll share these things with you. I'll email them maybe over to Nissa afterwards. It's just a really nice infographic that gives you an idea, because you're never quite sure what exercise is good, what exercise is bad after having a baby. So this is just a really simple guide to what kinds of exercise are suitable at what kind of time after having a baby. So as you can see, from the first 2 weeks, you're just walking from room to room. Maybe you can start thinking about adding in some pelvic floor stuff, and then you're progressing that from up to week 4. You could start to add in some body weight exercises if you wish, and then sticking to low impact like cross trainer or bike, and then increasing that as you go along. So, you know, if you do feel like you want to get moving and you're not sure what is good and what is bad, you can check this out and kind of use it as a guide, as a graded return to getting back to impact exercise. You know, when you do want to get back to impact exercise, you have to think about, you know, what kind of a night have you had? Have you had any sleep that night? Are you getting enough nutrients? You know, are you managing to get some decent food into yourself? They're all considerations that you have to take on board before trying to beat your personal best, kind of thing. And also in the guidelines, we recommend that you've got a decent pelvic floor strength. You're not having any pelvic floor symptoms like leaking, heaviness, pain before getting back to high impact exercise. Yeah, and that you're pretty good on one leg, so you can practice one. I'll give you a link to the guidelines about getting back to impact exercise, and in those guidelines there's a list of exercises you can do, like squats and single leg squats and single leg heel raises. So they're nice tests to do to see if your body is ready to get back to impact exercise from that kind of 4 months, 6 months onwards. Yeah, so ideally having a postnatal check before adding in the exercise. So a postnatal check or a mummy MOT check is a screen after you've had a baby. So we'll go through your obstetric history, what your pregnancy was like, what kind of delivery you had, if there was any interventions. We get all that information, and if you're having any symptoms. We check your alignment, we'll check your breathing, your abdominal muscles. So we'll check the abdominals, we'll check any C-scars and what your gap is like as well, your abdominal gap. We'll always do a pelvic floor internal check if you're happy to do that, just to see how the strength, how you are lifting your pelvic floor, how you are relaxing, and checking where the organs are at, and just give you some advice, like I was talking about, how to lift the baby, you know, toileting, sex, we talk about lubrication, all that kind of stuff, and give you some basic exercises just to kind of get you started. I'm going to pause there now. I don't think I had much else on that presentation. So should we do some, take some questions, and then if we still got some time, I can talk to you a bit about C-section recovery and things like that. What do you think?
That sounds perfect, Niamh. First of all, that was really super interesting. So thank you.
I feel like I'm rattling on there, and I don't know if you're finding it relevant or not.
No, that was not rattling at all. It was like super, super articulate and interesting. Definitely.
Oh, good.
Honestly. And I think, yeah, I know that your internet, you know, might be a slight delay, so we might keep ourselves on, just with voices. We'll see how we go. And I'm going to put it out, ladies. I've got a couple of questions myself, but ladies, I'm sure you have questions too. So I'll let you guys go first. You can either pop the questions in the chat box and Niamh will read them out, or if you want to unmute and ask a question, you just go for it. Don't be polite. Go for it.
Yeah.
Ask whatever you want.
I've heard it all before, and yeah, so whatever if you're having any issues, fire away. Yeah, so what questions did you have, Nissa?
Oh, okay, let me go then in that case. So I definitely got a little bit of POP, the pelvic organ prolapse, and I can just feel that my cervix, it's a lot lower than it used to be. So I can feel it maybe let's say 3 centimeters away from my the entrance of my vagina. And I haven't got any other symptoms at all, so I'm feeling really well, no incontinence or anything like that. But I'd just love to know a bit more about rehabilitation, kind of the practices that might help. You know, I'd love to come and see you anyway, but just in general, what can be useful and kind of long-term time frame for recovery? I've got no idea. I'd love to know more.
Yeah. Well, so if anyone doesn't know what that would feel like, what the cervix would feel like. So if you pop your finger in your vagina and your cervix is usually like 6 or 8 centimeters high, and it feels like the end of your nose. So it feels like a ring of cartilage that you just hit. And in pregnancy and afterwards, it is normal for it to be a bit lower. And often I'll check vaginally and find the cervix and then check it in standing. And again, it'll drop about 1 centimeter or 2 from lying to standing with gravity. So don't panic. That's, it's normal for it to bob about, and often it'll be a little bit lower around your cycle as well. Maybe just before a period, it'll feel a bit lower than usual. So it's never a static thing. It does bob up and down a bit. And so that's what it would feel like. I think connective tissue. So connective tissue are like puppet strings that help to support our organs from above. And obviously that gets stretched during pregnancy. And it can take up to 2 years for connective tissue to remodel. So I think it's important to kind of bear that in mind and look after that connective tissue as it's healing. So ways to do that would be like I said earlier, when you're lifting something heavy like a baby, or it's the paraphernalia that goes with a baby, try to blow as you go. Because if you think about lifting something while you do a breath hold, so you kind of go and lift, that's all that your pressure inside your abdomen is like a coffee plunger then on top of your cervix and your organs. So it's not going to happen every time. You're not going to do a lovely exhalation every time you lift something heavy, but even some of the time is going to make a difference and just help to give that connective tissue a little bit of a break so it can heal and remodel. Again, if things like improving your pelvic floor sling, so pelvic floor relaxation and pelvic floor strengthening, because if you think about it, the pelvic floor is going to help support the organs from below. So adding in some pelvic floor exercises over time is just going to make sure that pelvic floor sling is being most efficient as possible at holding things up. So it depends. Like if you're not getting any symptoms from it day to day, just get into good habits like lifting, not getting constipated, doing some pelvic floor exercises, and it'll usually just sort itself out and improve over time. If it does cause you symptoms and you're feeling it in your vagina day to day and it's bothering you, then I'll often suggest using a pessary. So let me just show you here. I've got my box, what a pessary looks like. Oh, I forgot these are Bluetooth. I can wander around. Okay, so a pessary is just like a silicone device, a bit like a menstrual cup that we pop inside the vagina. So this is a cube, so it's a squishy silicone cube. This is a ring, so it's a squishy silicone ring, and I just teach the woman to pop it in the vagina, you know, for those days where you know you're going to be on your feet a long time, or you're going to be doing a lot of lifting that day, or you're going out for a long walk, and usually you feel a bit of heaviness in the vagina. Then I'd say, well, just pop this in. It's like a sports bra. It helps to support the organs, and then you can just take it out when you come home, give it a wash, and it's there for next time. So if you're having symptoms from the prolapse and it's really bothering you, then you can just use one of those, thinking about maybe just using it for that first postnatal year, you know, while you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, or while the connective tissue is kind of healing and remodeling. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. I love it. The sports bra analogy. That is brilliant.
The sports bra, yeah.
Yeah, that extra support. That makes perfect sense. That actually really does. Do you know what? I'm on a roll with my questions. I'm going to ask one more before I hand it over to everybody else, Niamh.
Sure.
My other question is, I've kind of heard a bit about reformer Pilates, but one, I don't actually know what it is.
Okay.
And two, I don't really know like who would that be appropriate for? When might you do it? Just, yeah, again, love to understand a bit more, would be brilliant.
I think just finding a decent teacher who has lots of experience with postnatal women, you know, so they know how to grade you back slowly and keep an eye out for your symptoms and check everything's okay. Reformer Pilates is supposed to be more supportive than mat-based Pilates, because you're kind of suspended with slings and springs, so your body is there's no impact on your body and there's less strain on your body, so it's more kind of, it's a supportive type of Pilates, so it is a nice one to do after having a baby, you know, as a stepping stone to going on and doing other things down the line. But I love yoga postnatally as well, because yoga is getting that diaphragmatic breathing going, and you're getting into some really lovely stretches, some nourishing stretches for your back, and I think it's a lovely place to start, and just to help calm your nervous system down as well.
That's great. That really makes sense. That's perfect. Thank you, Niamh. And I'm going to hand it over, ladies. If you have questions, don't be shy. You are very welcome to ask. I know that actually when Niamh has done talks for me before, when it's in person, there's always so many questions, isn't there, Niamh? I think it's something that women, we want to know more. We want to know more.
Yeah. Okay, so in the chat box, Hannah said there's a lot of advice helpful for postpartum. Is there any useful tips for prenatal? So I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Hannah, and maybe just tell me what kind of, do you mean for your pelvic floor or just in general? Are you there? Are you still there, Hannah? Maybe she's popped to the loo.
Hey, I was just on mute.
Oh, there you are. Hiya.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Did you catch my question on the chat?
Yeah. So the question was about any useful tips for prenatal. So I was just wondering, do you mean from a pelvic floor point of view, or in general, or?
Yeah. So
what do you need?
You see a lot of videos and read some things that say you should be kind of doing your squeezing and your exercises. And then I've also read some conflicting things that say that's a bit old school, it's not necessary, and you're better off just staying fit and healthy and walking and being active. Do you have a view?
I think, well, first of all, I think if you're having any pelvic floor symptoms, like the ones I chatted about earlier, a bit of heaviness or some leaking, then I think it's nice to give it a little bit of specific rehab. So, you know, maybe do a set of pelvic floor exercises once a day, or use your squeezy up once a day, just to try and keep things ticking along. but yeah, if you're not having any pelvic floor symptoms, I mean, it is a muscle that works anyway. Every time we breathe, every time we go to lift, and when we're walking, it's always moving. So I wouldn't kind of beat yourself up if you're not doing a regular set of pelvic floor exercises every day. I think prenatal, though, it's lovely to practice that. So you saw that diagram earlier where the diaphragm and the pelvic floor were moving up and down. I think it's just nice to kind of keep them working in sync. So, you know, practicing relaxing it on the inhale, practicing gathering it on the exhale. I just think that's really nice to do every now and again to keep them working efficiently. And then that comes in super useful when it comes to a vaginal delivery, because you can really work on that inhale, pelvic floor relax when it comes to vaginal delivery as well. So yeah, I would do it. I'd practice the breathing and the pelvic floor thing now and again. If you're having any pelvic floor issues, I would do some regular pelvic floor exercises.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, great. And then there was a question from Sheena, who said she was struggling with some constipation in the first trimester, and since then have some hemorrhoids. That seems to be a bit bulging more as the baby's growing, but not painful. Any pre-postnatal advice to prevent this worsening and keep the pelvic floor strong? So don't worry, as I mentioned, constipation is very common in pregnancy, and so are hemorrhoids. So for anyone who doesn't know what hemorrhoids are the vessels just inside the anus, just inside the back passage. They get a little bit swollen during pregnancy. So they can feel a little bit heavy around the back passage, or it might feel, you might have some itchiness there, or you might even notice some bleeding when you wipe after a bowel motion. You might notice a little bit of bleeding, and they are super common during pregnancy. The ways of managing them are avoiding constipation if you can, because there's less pressure pushing on them when you need to go for a bowel motion. I think they usually feel a bit worse at the end of the day. So if you can get a rest in when you can, just to help rest the hemorrhoids, that helps too. I think pelvic floor relaxation really helps with hemorrhoids as well. I think sometimes it can be a little bit tight around the back passage, and that can kind of affect the hemorrhoids as well. So sitting on your big ball or lying down and practicing pelvic floor relaxation and some pelvic floor lifts just really helps to bring awareness to that area. And a lot of women will find that actually helps with the symptoms as well. So that's how to, keep on top of them. And yeah, how to keep the pelvic floor strong. Just the things we discussed earlier, trying to relax and then do your lifts as well. I hope is that okay, Sheena?
Thank you, Niamh. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And then a couple of questions about specific exercises and when to reintroduce from Claire and Finn. Are you on there, Claire?
Yeah. Hi, Niamh. Thanks. So one of them is to do with swimming. So I noticed that you had swimming on that little chart you had. I think you had it at 8 weeks, did you, as the kind of time to introduce swimming, I think. So I've got a holiday, and it will be before I'm 8 weeks, and the place that we're staying at has a swimming pool. So if I wasn't pounding up and down the pool doing lengths, but just having a little casual, gentle float about and a bit of a swim, would that be okay, or do you think it would be better to wait and avoid a dip in the pool?
Yeah, I just had a quick check back there. It was, swimming is 8 to 12 weeks, but I think it is talking about kind of swimming lengths, and exerting yourself in the pool. So at 5 weeks, I think it'd be so nice to submerge yourself in the water. Just if you have a scar, I don't know if you've had a C-section or a vaginal.
No vaginal birth.
Okay, and any perineal scars?
Yes, I had some tearing, but not. It was second degree tearing, so not too much.
So my only thing would be about that, just to make sure that that's healed before, because you don't want to risk infection on the scar. So just make sure that it feels healed and it's not bothering you. then that should be fine. But yeah, getting yourself in the water and just having a bob and doing a few strokes up and down, yeah, that'll be absolutely fine.
Good. And then the other exercise, which you didn't have on there because it's a slightly random one, I found, because I've been trying to find online classes I can do, because obviously there's nothing that you can actually do in person at the moment, is there? And I found an online class that's a ballet class for mums and babies. So you pop your baby in your sling and do ballet that's specifically for well, it's pregnant mums and mums with babies in slings. They've said that should be fine from 6 weeks, as long as everything's going well. Does that sound sensible to you, from 6 weeks for that?
Yeah, that is fine. The only thing is when the baby's in the sling, so make sure the sling is up on your chest.
Yeah.
You know, that it's nice and supported on your bones, so that the baby isn't just pressing on your belly and your abdomen. So if the baby's pushing against your abdomen for the whole class, it's just extra pressure downwards on your pelvic organs. So get the baby in a decent sling that's supportive and nice and snug.
Yeah.
Try to use the whole thing about exhale on the effort. So if they get you to do an exercise, make sure that you exhale on the effort of that exercise. And yeah, you kind of, and listen out for your body. So listen out for those symptoms of any leaking during the class. If it feels a bit heavy or achy in your pelvic floor, they could be signs that maybe it is a little bit too much too soon, and to come back and modify things and make it a bit easier than usual.
Yeah. Well, seeing as I haven't done ballet since I was 6 years old, I think I'll be taking it slow, because I'm coordinated enough to do any of it. And then I had one final quick question. So you talked about, in one of your slides, you said that a checkup with a women's health physio is something that should be available to everyone. So realistically, is that available to people? So when I go and have my 6-week check with my GP, can I be saying to them, I'd like to have a referral to have a checkup from a women's health physio? Or are they going to say, actually, if you don't have anything, if you don't have any problematic symptoms, we aren't doing that?
It depends on your GP, I think. I think some GPs will only refer you if you're having some symptoms that you're concerned about, like leaking or heaviness. So, I mean, you could say, look, I have some concerns if I'm doing my pelvic floor exercises correctly. You could mention something like that, and see if he or she will refer you to the NHS physios, because it kind of depends on who you get.
Okay, brilliant.
It's unfortunate, but hopefully someday it'll be more widely available on the NHS, and it just makes sense really to have a check after pregnancy, just to make sure everything's on track, and then you can kind of go on your merry way.
Perfect.
But so mention to the GP, maybe you're not quite sure how to do your pelvic floor exercises, or you've had a bit of leaking, and is it okay if I can get a referral to the physios?
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
All right. Have a lovely holiday.
Thanks.
That was brilliant. Thanks for the questions, ladies. They were good questions.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, we're nearly at time, Niamh. I'm aware it's nearly on the hour. I've got one more question. I suddenly thought it touched on, I know a lot of us are carrying our babies in slings these days, more than perhaps historically. Before, everyone was in buggies 10 years ago, but now it's a bit more slings. You said about the place, to carry baby on the bones. Is it okay, as baby gets bigger, 7 kilos, 10 kilos, 12 kilos, anything to be thoughtful about with that? I just suddenly had a thought. I wonder.
I think think about your alignment when the baby is in the sling. So like I said, get a nice, something that's going to be supportive for you, and where you feel like you're carrying the baby on the bones. And then just check yourself in the mirror sideways and just see what's happening. So that kind of that typical postnatal posture that you see, or pregnancy posture, you know, so the bump is out here and we end up kind of drifting forwards with the bump. Or when the baby arrives, we end up making a nice shelf here for the baby, and we end up sticking our hips out in front of us, and our ribs are kind of leaning back like this. So ideally, you actually, you want to keep those hips back over your heels. So now my rib cage is stacked over my pelvis. It's not like my pelvis is out there, my rib cage is back here, and I've got a sling on, because you're going to get back pain. You're going to get a lot more pressure on your abdomen and more for your pelvic floor to cope with. So I think checking that in the mirror sideways, that your ribs are stacked over your pelvis. You feel like your hips are over your heels. Your hips aren't out there over your toes. I think that can make a real difference. And then when you're in that alignment, get the sling nice and snug with you. And if you are getting back pain, or you're feeling some pelvic floor symptoms, maybe think about bringing the buggy and the sling with you, so you're not doing the whole length of the walk with the sling. You know, you could use a little bit of both. If it might be a nice idea as well, because it is like when they do get 6-8 kilograms, it's a lot of work.
They keep growing, don't they? That's really good to think about, that alignment. That's such a good thing. Also, Niamh, just to say, I'm going to pop this out on my social media. So I know you're London based. It would be really great if you'd share, where's the best place for mums to find you? What kind of services do you offer as well? Just so people know.
So you can find me through my website, maternityphysio.co.uk, and I've got online booking at all the clinics, just all in there. And I've got a blog, a learn section that's got more information about the stuff that we discussed today, and C-section and things like that. So it's well worth going over to the website if you want to learn a bit more. If I'm not near you and you need a women's health physio, there are a few options. So like we said earlier, that you can go and ask your GP for an NHS referral. It might take a few weeks, and it might be a little bit longer because of COVID, but that option is there. Or you can go to the Squeezy app website. They have a register of women's health physios. Or you can go to the mummymot.com website. They've also got a register of women physios who do the postnatal check. So they're the main places. If you are struggling with anything, or you want to have a postnatal check, they're the main places to go and find someone near you. Is that what you asked me?
Yes, that's perfect. So, and if ladies are London based, you're at maternityphysio.co.uk.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I've just started doing I've just started to do some face-to-face sessions on a Wednesday and a Friday over in London Fields. So they'll probably be sticking to that until mid-September, when the kids finally get back into some kind of routine and I can do a few more days.
I bet you've been busy.
Yeah, with the homeschooling and all that crack as well. It's just, can't wait for mid-September. Well, hopefully if things don't change and it's still going ahead.
Fingers crossed. Thank you for your time, Niamh. It's been brilliant as ever.
Well, thanks for having me.
That's awesome.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, ladies. And
thank you very much, Niamh.
No problem.
Thank
and
you.
an email or my email address as well. Do you need to know that, Nissa, in case anyone wants to email me any questions?
Do you know what? If it's all right with you, Niamh, we've got a private Facebook group it's got all my clients on there. There's a few hundred. Can I add you to that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone wants to ask me anything afterwards, you can just drop me an email.
That'd be perfect. Add your email and any bits that you want to share, and then everyone can have a look. That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Bye, ladies. See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.